Hello everyone, good to be here, good to see you all. I'm going to give two disclaimers before I talk. The first one is that I don't have much love for the government, to be honest, but I do love people. And what I mean by that is I love human beings. So if I say something that's challenging, if you find it challenging, it might be possibly because you're identifying with something that the government has given you, which is a construct. That's why I don't love it. It's just a construct. But I love you because you're a person. So just remember that. Second disclaimer, and it's important because of the history and the context of the relationship between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and non-Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this country, is that I'm not Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. Frankly, therefore, the voice should not be any of my business. I believe that it's disrespectful and inappropriate for non-Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people to make decisions which purport to affect the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That's what's been happening here for more than 200 years. It hasn't done either side any good. But the government's forcing me and everybody else to vote on what is best for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in a referendum. That's 97% of the population that's not Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander voting on what's best for 3% of the population. To me, that shows a sense of ownership over those people, and I don't like that. But I am a human rights lawyer, so people listen to me about human rights issues. I don't say they necessarily should, but the approach that I have taken to The Voice is spending as much time as I can consulting with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, particularly elders, about the Voice referendum, and asking them what they think about it, and asking them what they want. So a lot of what I'm saying today, I say with the blessing of those people, and those people I respect. The truth is the truth, even if most of us have forgotten it. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here have one of the purest tethers, connections to that truth. For me to learn about my ancestors, I have to go read inscriptions on tombs. Their old people still hold and live the truth, even though we've tried pretty hard to interrupt them. So I'm going to talk about sovereignty. A lot of elders have expressed a fear to me that by consenting to The Voice, that they will agree or acknowledge that they are a part of the Australian system and that this might be used against them to argue that they don't retain their own sovereignty. On the other side, I've heard concerns from non-Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people that The Voice will have the ability to usurp democratic processes. So what I would say to answer both of those things is this, and I'm talking now about law, LAW, the British common law legal system in which I work. There are competing sovereignties on this land at law in the English common law legal system. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have never declared themselves subjects of the LAW law. They've never declared themselves subjects to the Queen or the King or the Commonwealth. They have their own older law, which is the law of the land. Upon coming here, the British unilaterally declared terra nullius, that this land belonged to no one, and operated on that basis. On the basis that it became theirs and that the native people could be ignored and in many cases extinguished. In a famous case, Mabo, the High Court of this legal system said that on conquest or settlement, root title in Australia vested in the Crown. This is called a grund norm, which is like a basic rule in law, something that's necessary in order for a system to make sense. If the High Court said anything other than that, the entire system would lose legitimacy. So the High Court said that on conquest or settlement, title to this place vested in the Crown. And they said native title exists, but it's subordinate to the Crown's title to the land. It's underneath it. So the High Court basically confirmed that they think that the Crown owns this land. Again, that's obvious because if they didn't say that, it would delegitimise the whole country. But there's 2 points here. It's true that the first people of this land never ceded what we call sovereignty. They never consented to the occupation of Britain on this land. And that means we have competing sovereignties. That's just the reality. There are competing sovereignties on this land. Second thing I'll say is that in international law, Australia is a party to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. That declaration actually says that the first people on this land retain sovereignty over this land, and it makes clear, and this is what the declaration says, not what I'm saying, that Australia is guilty of an illegal occupation on this land by the definitions in that declaration. This means that in international law, if any of the original sovereign tribes on this land were recognised by another nation, Australia could be taken to the International Court of Justice and tried for things like genocide and illegal occupation. Now, other than the potential to be hauled before the International Court of Justice, the international treaties and covenants don't hold much sway here, as we all experienced over the past few years in particular. Unless they're actually enshrined into domestic law, they're relatively powerless. So what does all of that mean? Well, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have sovereignty over this land, and I'm using that quotation mark because sovereignty itself is a Western concept, but they've never entered into any treaty with the people who occupied the land after them, which is us. The Commonwealth claims sovereignty over this land by virtue of having conquered it. At international law, that's illegal, but international law doesn't hold much sway domestically unless we voluntarily choose to let it. So here's the question, right? So we've got all of that set up. There are competing sovereignties here. Here's the question. What would it mean if Aboriginal people consented on some level to being included in the Constitution? Would it mean that they accept that they are a part of this system rather than retaining a legitimate claim that they exist outside of it? Could that ever be used against them? What about in the broader context that many of us know about what is happening in the world right now? The centralisation of power in bodies of elite technocrats and bureaucrats. Indigenous sovereignty around the world is a massive obstacle to that because the mechanisms that are being forced onto us hold no authority over the law and customs of people who were here first and technically never consented to the operation of those systems on this land. Here's a key question. Is including Indigenous people within the Constitution intended to rope them into a framework so that they can't help save the rest of us from it? I personally don't blame Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from being sceptical that this could be the true intention behind the voice. I've seen and studied the way that the government here works. It's not just our government. Many governments around the world are working in this way. And it didn't just start with COVID. It became a lot more obvious and a lot more people are now aware of it, but it's been happening for a long time. So I support the elders who believe that agreeing to the voice might dilute their claim to sovereignty, and I would not be so disrespectful as to dismiss their fears. There's a chance they know something that we don't. One of the things I hear about a lot is that apparently Aboriginal people were consulted, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people were consulted about the voice. The idea of a small group of representatives making decisions on behalf of a collective, which is what the voice is trying to implement, is something that's baked into the legal system of this land. And when I say that, I mean the Westminster legal system. That's not the way that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people do things. They don't have a small number of people making decisions on behalf of a whole. There's a couple of elders speaking after me, so I won't speak to things I'm not qualified to speak to. But it seems that the government might try to claim that by consulting with the voice, they're going to be taking into account the views of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. My question would be, how is that even possible given that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people do not operate within a hierarchical, top-down societal structure? Are we seeking to force a particular model of governance, which we are used to, onto a people who operate on an entirely different governmental and cultural framework? Even if well-intentioned, is that actually going to have a positive impact, given it fundamentally misunderstands the ancient systems and law of the people it is purporting to help? Besides all of that, I'm told time and time again that the consultation that the government keeps referring to was actually selective and based on corporate interests, not based on a genuine desire to consult with anybody here. I can't confirm that, but I have to say it doesn't surprise me. So, I'm just going to close with a few comments which I think are important. The government here has never cared about the well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That's history, it's clear, it's in the record. So history suggests the voice is not about that. In the past few years, those of us who didn't already know it realised that the government doesn't care that much about us either. So maybe we can realise that we all have something in common, right? We also know that all anybody is talking about at the moment is the voice. It's everywhere, right? It's in the mainstream media. Everybody knows how corrupt the mainstream media is. It doesn't matter what side of politics you're on or how much of a conspiracy theorist you are. Mainstream media is bought and sold. It's a marketplace. The voice is everywhere in the mainstream media. We know that one of their main tactics is distraction. It's been happening for a very long time. Misdirection. They try desperately to make us look in one direction so that we don't realise what's going on over there. That's the way a lot of legislation is passed. There's a crisis or a perceived crisis or an alleged crisis. Look at the laws that are passing during that time. They always involve massive impositions on human rights. A classic example is the terrorism laws that came in after 9/11, during 9/11. Very invasive surveillance laws that we're seeing play out now with all the facial recognition stuff that's going on. So what are they trying to distract us from? What could they be trying to distract us from? I'll give you three things. It's what they're always trying to distract us from. First, from what's actually going on, what they're actually implementing. Central bank digital currencies, digital surveillance, censorship via the misinformation bill they're trying to pass, actions of the World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, tidal wave of vaccine injuries and deaths, attempted mitigation of all of our individual civil liberties for the benefit of a globalist technocratic system where the few who know best control the many who can't be trusted with liberty. Second thing, maybe more importantly, from ourselves and our own well-being. Where our focus goes, energy flows. If we're focusing on external issues, and especially arguing about them, we're not focusing on being the best versions of ourselves. Best versions of ourselves wouldn't stand for any of this. We are unmovable. We are full of light and love. We don't allow our fellow human beings, our collective values, our collective well-being to be trodden on nor ourselves. We don't compromise our kids for the sake of our own reputational comfort. So how are we doing? How are you doing? Is there something that you could be doing, some work you could be doing on yourself that you're not doing because you're arguing about the voice? Thirdly, it's about division, divide and conquer. The more inflammatory debates and polarising topics that they throw into the community, the more likely we are to spend all of our time fighting each other instead of realising that actually our common enemy is the organisation that is throwing these polarising topics into the community. If we just work together as a community, we can ignore them completely and create a life for ourselves that's actually worth living. Now, I'm not saying these issues are completely facetious and hollow. I'm not saying to ignore the voice or anything like that. It is important. I talked about some of the implications. Grandmother Malara, Uncle Bruce Shillingsworth and others will talk about that. But we can't be transfixed by it. We can't let it overtake our actual instinct of community and relationship with each other. We can't let them distract us into thinking that there's a group over there that's our enemy and we have to look at them and deal with them so they don't steal our stuff. It's not what it's about. We have to retain our autonomy and remain the masters of our own ships and pay careful attention to the direction we're sailing in overall. Thank you.